Welcome again to the Amplify podcast. This is the podcast for accounting firm growth, powered by the Association for Accounting Marketing. I'm your host, Mike Jones, and today I am super excited to discuss the power of showing people that they matter in accounting firms. Joining me today for the conversation is Heather Esposito, Director of Learning Development and Colleague Engagement at BPM. Heather brings over 25 years of progressive experience in education, sales, leadership, and talent development to our conversation today. Heather, I'm very excited that you're here. We're going to jump right in. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the work that you do and how you kind of got to this place, as I know it's probably not the traditional path that many take.
Exactly. Well, I do have a degree in accounting. My undergraduate's in accounting, and this is the first time that I have ever worked in an accounting firm. And I'm at the back end of my career, so a circuitous route to get here. I would say that I have always been a learner at heart. Growing up, I was just good at school. I used to play teacher and all of those things, and found myself when I was working on my undergraduate really falling in love with education. And that's why I didn't actually get a job in accounting. I went into special education, and that led me on this path that eventually led to adult development and in the corporate environment. I think probably while I was teaching, what really kind of led me on the adult development side was I became a consultant and a director with Mary Kay Cosmetics and loved teaching people about their skin. And I did that because I was looking to make extra money as a teacher, because it's hard to survive on a teacher's salary. And I never really thought of myself as a salesperson, but if I found something great, I always wanted to tell everybody about it. Or if I found a better way to do something, I couldn't wait to share it with others. And so I think that I found this love of helping people, and that really served me well. And so that led to a career in sales. Ended up moving because of Katrina, actually. So I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, even though I work for a California-based organization, and we were impacted by Katrina, lost our home, and ended up in Atlanta for a year. And that's where I found the contract furniture industry. And I was really just doing sales support to have something to do. And when I came back to Louisiana, some of the people that I was supporting said, "Will you rep our products in Louisiana?" And I said, I know absolutely nothing about commercial furniture. And they're like, "Okay, that's fine. We can teach you product. You know how to sell." And it wasn't long after I was in those positions that one of the organizations that I was working with asked if I would move into sales, learning, and development. And that was really the beginning of my adult development journey. Even though in Mary Kay, I was teaching, I was a sales director, I was helping the consultants be successful. I really found this love in corporate development, and my niche kind of became leadership development, about helping people work on their coaching skills as leaders, how to help them develop others. And so this whole journey kind of evolved from there. And then I was ready for a move, and I saw this post for a job in an accounting firm, and I was like, I don't think an accounting firm is really going to fit who I am, because my work is very human centric, and that's not been traditionally the reputation of accounting firms. And I saw this job posting that said, "Because people matter." And I'm like, that's not what I expected. And that drew me in to understand more about the firm and what they valued. And here I am today leading their learning, development, and engagement efforts.
That is a fascinating story. Just
not at all the career path that somebody would lay out for you if this is where you wanted to end up one day. But
but some of it actually makes a lot of sense. I think, just from my experience, like how much like teaching is involved in sales. Like I feel like I talk to, my technically my job is somewhat sales oriented, and I know that at heart I'm a teacher. Like that's really like what I'm actually good at. But those skills translate, especially when you're talking about, in your case, you're not doing sales now. Obviously you're more on the training side, development side. But even in like any kind of like relationship driven industry, and I think most industries are that, right? Being able to educate others, share information, empathize with them, understand where they're at and how to connect them to like, hey, here's what I know that might be able to help you. And that it's hard. That is good sales. I mean, there's,
Yeah,
bad kind of sales where that you're not doing that. You're doing something else.
yeah, I feel like I'm still in sales today in some ways. I mean, I'm selling my ideas. I'm
Mhm.
selling why we should invest in an initiative and what difference it will make for people, or uh, getting their buy-in on a direction that we're taking. So I, if I look back, I can trace a red thread from
Mm.
every experience I've had and what I've taken away from that that serves me today. But like I said, you would never have designed this as a career path or strategy to get here. But everything that I've learned, and I've taken away lessons that continue to serve me today.
That's great. Well, you mentioned how BPM kind of drew you in with how human centric they are, even in that tagline.
Yeah.
Um, can you share a little bit about like what does that actually mean and how is that displayed even in the firm's name and tagline and just the messaging that you guys put out into the world?
Like most professional services firms, at one point it was the initials for three names, and over time that was adapted to be our motto and to really talk about what the firm stands for. And that's some significant work that's taken place over the last like 7 years or so to become because people matter is what BPM stands
Mm.
for. And it is our motto, but it's also like the name of our firm in a certain respect. That's what those three letters stand for today in everything that we do. And it drives what's important to us and
Mm.
keeps us centered and grounded in who we are as a firm and the way we want to show up for our people, the community, our clients, all of them.
Mm. No, I think that's really, really cool. And I love how you're integrating these, there's core values behind this, and we'll get into that in a little bit here. But there's obviously a mission, right? There's mission, there's purpose behind what you're doing, and you're incorporating that even into things like the name, into your kind of slogan, and into kind of how you present to the world. It's not just, oh, we have some values, we talk about them every once in a while, and they never really like impact the entire identity of the firm. So I think that's like fascinating. As a brand identity guy, like that stuff like gets me really excited.
Yeah,
So
that's the
yeah.
goal. That's the goal, is to really permeate who we are as far as our employer brand, as far as our outward facing client brand.
Mhm.
It should it should permeate all of that if that's
Mhm.
truly who we are.
Yeah. So what does it mean to actually be a values-based organization, right? We talked about, values are kind of at the core of this. What does that look like? What does that mean? And what are the benefits that come from being that focused on your values?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. In some ways, I think it makes life and decision making much easier because you can use those values to make decisions about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And it's really clear why you make those decisions. And then it's also one of the hardest things that you do, because once you state that you have values and these are the things that are
Yeah.
important, it's really important that your behavior aligns with that, or people will like figure that out really
Yeah.
quickly, that they are just words on a wall or just words you put out there, and it's not in integrity with who you show up as every day. So what it means to me is that you do know what you are about. You do have something that you're grounded in. And for me, when I was looking to find my next place, it helped me know that this was a place where I could do the kind of work that I do. If you're not a human centric organization, I am really not a good fit, because nothing that I talk about will resonate for you. You won't buy into any of the ideas because you fundamentally hold something else of
Mm.
value. And so I think it's important from a recruiting strategy. It's important from, like I said, a decision making strategy, and also from our long term planning about what are we really going to put our effort behind, because time and money are all limited resources that we have. And so we have to invest our time and we have to invest in our money in the things that align with who we say we are.
Yeah, I love that the way you stated that. Like the values are almost like your decision-making matrix, right? It's the way in which you look at the world and you say, what are we going to do and what are we not going to do? I talk with a lot of people about values in my work. And one of the things I always encourage them is they're thinking about what are our values. I say, would you negotiate on them? Would you be willing to sacrifice whatever your stated value is in order to make a decision in a different direction, right? Or we wouldn't sacrifice that. Well, then maybe that is a value, right? Or we might put that one on the table and say, yeah, we might not do things that way every
Not a
time.
value. Yeah, not a value.
Okay, that's probably not one of your values. We can talk about goals. We can talk about metrics. We can talk about all sorts of other good things that might be. But it may not be an actual core value. So you guys went through that process recently of kind of redefining your values. Talk to me a little bit about what that process looked like and what those values are today.
So we did work with an outside group who came in and to kind of be a less biased stakeholder and did stakeholder interviews, talked to people, understood how they saw the firm, what their experience of the firm was, who we said we wanted to be, what was aspirational for us, what we felt like we were already doing. And it was an iterative, kind of a multi-stage iterative process of kind of bringing back, here's what we heard, massaging language, making sure that the feel represented who we are, and that's not right or wrong. Some firms want to have a more professional, formal feel. Some want to have a more collegial feel. Some want to have a fun feel. So it needed to represent who we say we are and who we're striving to be. And eventually what we ended up with was we moved from 7 values to 3, which I think is a really important distinction, because when you have too many values, it's hard to remember them. We did have an acronym which made it slightly easier, but not
the 7's
not
still
a no-brainer. 7's still a lot. There's a magic to 3. I mean, 3 are sticky, 3 are memorable. It allows us to, as an individual contributor, I can rattle them off to you right now. And if we can't do that, if you can't just say what are our values and they're memorable enough for people, then the chances of them living those values, which I think is probably one part of what is a values-based organization that we didn't talk about, is you can say you're a values-based organization because you created the values. What I think, and I think the research says it's about 10%, you may know being in that business as well, but only about 10% of organizations really operationalize those values into behaviors. And I think that's the big leap between just creating them and really helping every colleague feel like they do matter, because we've determined and defined how we behave that aligns with those values. Because I can put a word out and it may mean something very different to you than it does to me. Yeah. And we can have a lot of people thinking they're living the values, and it's not necessarily the culture or what was intended. Yep. And so to be very clear about what those values look like in action when we live them, and also what they don't look like. Like you can go too far, that behaviors that kind of seem like they're the values, but they're actually really dysfunctional. And you want to clearly define what it isn't as much as you want to define what it is.
Yeah. I like to think about values almost as like they're the edges of your business, right? They're the yes and no's of your business. Yes, we will do this. No, we will not do that. And there's other tools like purpose and mission that kind of give you more of direction. Yes. Values aren't necessarily directional. They're the outside edges, right? This is where we operate in here and not out here, right? Because that's beyond our values. And there might even be good things out there, right? It's not like, your values are the only good values in the world. It's just, no, we have to be somewhere. We have to be focused on something. And we have a particular DNA or culture or, set of particularities about our firm and what we care about and how we operate that determine our values, right?
Like, what do we believe? It's that
exactly
I think about it in two ways. It's one, it's the strong foundation. Everything else has to be built on those
Mm-hmm.
values. And then it's also the North Star. When you don't know, you should be able to look back to those values to help chart your course, find your path. Because if it's not in alignment with the values, then either our values aren't right or that decision's not right.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And I like that you said they're what you believe, right?
Yeah, they're
I'm finding
principles.
more firms, not universally, but I'm picking up a few more firms here and there that are leaning more towards that language, even of like rather than values, using the word belief or
Mm-hmm.
beliefs. I like principles too. That's a good word too.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
sure you could get nitty gritty and parse those apart and be like, no, those are actually different things. But I like beliefs because I really do think that values as one of those probably the most foundational element of your identity as a firm, as your culture. They really are like these are the principles by which we're going to live and die, and we don't
yeah,
negotiate on them. And I've told clients, and I get some interesting looks sometimes in the room when I tell them this, but I say it's not a value unless you're willing to sacrifice some money for it.
yep.
Um, like it doesn't really mean anything if you're making decisions that are only ever, revenue driven. Uh, that's not necessarily telling me what the value is. A value is when like, nope, we made a decision because this is what we believe is right, and this is the principle by which we hold to, and it might cost us some money. And I go, oh, okay, that's a real value.
Exactly. Yeah, because I'm willing to put a stake in the ground there.
Yep. Yep. So that's great. What are the values for BPM? These
Yeah.
new three. I want to hear them.
Yeah, our new values are people, being our best, and growing stronger. And
Hmm.
then there's some context around those. And like I said, we've defined some behaviors of what it
Yeah.
looks like in action. But at its simplest level, what we would hope is that every colleague would be able to say our values are people, being our best, and growing stronger.
Yeah. How have you started to communicate those out, right? Like there's this process to kind of define them, message them, put the right words around it, put the right, do's and don'ts around them, these behaviors. I love that. But then how do you start to move them into operations, right? Where it's not just a poster on the wall. It's not just, something we maybe talk about at the all hands meeting for a minute. How
Yeah,
do
so
we
we're
actually
only
operationalize them?
Yeah, we're only like 5 to 6 months into this journey, and
Yeah.
it was part of a corporate rebrand. So not only did we do our logo and our colors and our vision and our mission and our values, so there's been a number of layers to this. And the initial piece was just rolling out the new brand to get people excited about it, to share the context of what that logo represents. And I always think that's like one of the most interesting pieces of
Mm-hmm.
working with graphic designers, to see how they take a concept and put it into an image. And you look at the images sometimes and you're like, I don't get it. And then they
Yeah.
tell you the story of the
Yeah.
logo and what it how they were trying to visually represent something. I'm like, oh, I get it. That's so cool. And so that's where we started, was helping people get excited about why the colors were the colors that we had chosen, and what this logo was intended to represent, and why we tweaked the wording of the vision, and why we tweaked the wording of the mission. It wasn't a completely different, but it does
Mm-hmm.
have a different tone. We emphasize different things. We talked to our colleagues about that. We introduced the values, and that was kind of the first step. And that was, I would describe that as much more of like a marketing type
Sure.
event to get people excited and go, wow, this is so cool. This feels fresh.
Yeah.
You get that excitement going. And then we have started to introduce, so we have now an employer like playbook brand, not necessarily our brand book, but the playbook, which got
Mm-hmm.
into more of helping people understand the living the values piece. And what does that look like when we interact with our clients? What does it look like internally at BPM for the colleague experience? How does it impact the messaging for attracting new talent, for developing our talent, for retaining our talent? There is, we all know there's a talent shortage in the accounting industry. And in this profession, like it's got a reputation that doesn't necessarily fit common times. Like
Mm.
that's been earned over, that burnout
Yep.
culture or the 80-hour work week or the green visors and the pocket protectors. I mean, there's just a lot of things that have kind of carried forward, and that's not the accounting profession of today. And so to have a brand that represents who you want to be, that speaks to up and coming talent who are looking at things that on the surface may seem sexier, like the tech industry or what's new, like AI and things like that. And how do we have those opportunities to be innovative and fresh in accounting? And that's what we've really been looking at is how does this brand represent who we are and who we want to be in the profession and the kind of talent we want to attract. And that if you're looking for like the burnout culture,
Mm.
that's not who we want to be. I'm not saying that we don't ever have long hours and deadlines and that we don't get
No.
it wrong some of the time, but that's not who we want to be.
Yeah,
And that's not the message of what we're trying to portray and what we're striving to become.
that's great. What role do values have in like leadership development? Because I think, really when you think about how do you operationalize values, I feel
Yeah.
like so much of it starts with leadership, right? Yeah, you can do some bottom up things, but it really needs to come from the top, and it really needs to be integrated into the way that everyone leads, right? Any level of leadership requires living out the values, probably even to a degree that maybe feels maybe excessive or
No,
like
no, not
hard.
yeah, no, now you're speaking to my sweet spot because I am really, really passionate about leadership development and the role that leaders have in an organization, and what a deep responsibility we have for the people that we're privileged to lead. And so I think it's absolutely imperative. Yes, every colleague needs to know how to show up and as an individual contributor, how their behavior aligns with our values, but leaders bring the weather.
Mm.
And so what we've been working on that we haven't rolled out yet, but we've been working on behind the scenes is a leadership model that's aligned with our values. So what that looks like is if we believe in people, then a leader's role is to blank. If
Mm.
we believe in being our best, then a leader's role is to blank. If we believe in growing stronger, then what is the leader's role in that?
Mm.
And so there will be a set of leadership behaviors that are aligned with the values. That's how that's demonstrated, which is really a higher level of calling of living out those values. Yes, I'm still responsible for exhibiting them as a peer and an individual contributor, but as a leader, I'm called to a higher standard. And there's
Mm.
things that I have to do to really demonstrate and share the culture that we're working to create through the values and through the way that I lead or through the way
Mm.
that any of our leaders lead. So I
That's
think it's
great.
critical.
Yeah. No, I would fully agree with you on that. And I love kind of that idea of your model follows your values rather than just kind of they're maybe side by side, or maybe the model is disconnected completely from the values and from this mission that you have.
If it's disconnected, then to me it becomes meaningless. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so I've got to do this whole other thing that is completely separate. No, it's definitely
Yeah.
aligned. And as the director of learning and development, what that allows for me to do is to stop talking about learning as just training events like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
come to this program or take this course. That's not really helpful in a lot of ways. But if you tell me as a leader that you're working on creating stronger relationships with your team, then I can show you, well, here's the things that are available that help you become better at that as a
Mm.
leader. If you're working to inspire innovation and you need to develop curiosity, what do we offer in our library that could help you develop that? And then it becomes less about the program or less about the course than it does about what leadership behaviors is it
Yeah.
supporting that we all agree are foundational and important and aligned with our values.
Yeah. I think there's a tangential benefit too of the program doesn't become kind of the for lack of a better word, like sacred cow, right? Like
Yes.
it's, instead of like, oh, we can never ditch that tool or that program because we've had it forever and, we're bought in and we've always used it. Now it's like, well, what is the goal? What is the change in behavior that we're aiming at? Let's find the right tools to fit that, that will get us there. And if they're not getting us there, let's not do them. And you start to reduce some of the kind of just tool kind of program bundle that just continues to grow and grow and grow. And you're now focused on like, okay, what's the culture we're really trying to build here?
Yeah, and I think about that in accounting. We've been driven so long by the CPE check the box mindset. Like, and I get why we do that and why it's important. But when it's about the credit and not about really valuable learning, then we've kind of swung the pendulum too far. And so focusing on how are we being our best, focusing on how we're growing stronger. Now I can tie learning to that and make sure that we're delivering impactful learning experiences that also allow you to earn your CPEs versus I just need to get the CPE. I don't care how I get it. I don't even really care if it was great. I'd love to switch that mindset to learning being more integral and the CPE becomes and I got CPE too versus the other way around.
Yeah. And then we don't have to talk about certain other firms that are now in hot water for not approaching the CPEs in a correct way, in an integrous way.
Yes, yeah. It starts to drive, again, gets back to values. Yep. It starts to drive the wrong behavior.
Correct.
And that really gets to our culture and do the things that we reward, do the things that we, I don't really like the word punish, but the things that we like, but that we consequence. Mm-hmm. Does the way we behave align with our values? If not, then we're sending a different message and the message we send will always be stronger than the one we say. And that becomes our culture. The culture is the shared everyday habits. It's these small behaviors of living out the values that really determine what our culture is.
Yeah. And I know from our previous conversation we had before this call, just that you're starting to think about how to measure that as well, which I think is really interesting. Like, how do we start to measure those behaviors and the change, right, that we're aiming for? Like if a certain leader is looking to change certain behaviors, maybe within their team or even for themselves, how can you start to help them measure that over time? Rather than just measuring like, oh, did you complete the course? Did you complete the program? Did you do the thing that, we outlined as the remedy, when it's like, well, the remedy is we're looking for a different outcome. We're looking for a different behavior. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, not to get this conversation off track, but that's the question I ask when somebody comes to me and says, I think we need a training on X. I'm like, great. What is it that you're looking to see different as a result of this training? What's the outcome that you want or the gap that you're seeing and how people are showing up? Because training may or may not be the answer to that. I don't know. But just giving you a course does not mean that you're going to get what you want. And oftentimes you may not be happy with the outcome and people have invested time in doing that and it still didn't get you where you wanted to go. So yes, driving that conversation to more behavior-based outcomes so that we can figure out what's the right learning solution or coaching or experiential learning that needs to happen that will actually help that behavior change happen.
That's great. So what's next? What comes next in the kind of rollout plan?
Yeah, so I mean, this is an ongoing journey. This isn't a one and done. There's a piece of this that we believe that we do well today, and then there's pieces that are embedded in our values and our mission, and of course our vision that are aspirational for us. There are things that we deeply believe, and we're working daily to work towards that and continuous improvement to get better. So the kind of the first next steps are the leadership model. So to roll that out as part of our employer playbook. So we've talked about what the kind of the individual contributor living your values looks like. The next piece will be leading the values, continuing to, from a marketing perspective, to help people understand, to keep digging deeper into these, because it's an ongoing effort. We can't just say at one time and go, oh yeah, people know, like they're going to show up like this. We have to embed it into our performance management processes so that the things that we measure and the things that we acknowledge and the feedback that we give is also giving people feedback and evaluation in terms of how well they live the values, how they show up that way. And then it's just that continuous improvement piece of watching our engagement surveys, looking at what our colleague experiences, and are they indicating to us through their feedback that they believe that we are living in accordance with the values? If not, how do we need to continue to improve that? And that's not only a leadership role, but it's something that we then disseminate results back down into the teams, and we ask the colleagues to be part of helping us get to a new spot, to be part of the action planning. Yes, there's some things we need to take on at an organizational level, but colleague experience really exists more strongly at the team level, or whether it's the team that exists within a physical location, or a team that works on a client project, or a team that's intact because they are, like part of the learning and development team. That's where it really, the rubber meets the road in the day-to-day experience of a colleague really saying, yes, I believe that we live our values because I experience it in all of my day-to-day interactions. And that's work that we'll be continuing to do ongoing. I wish it was like a flip the switch. Yep, we're good. Got it all rolled out. It's that education and then holding each other accountable. And it's not a leader holding their team accountable. It's peer-to-peer, us holding each other accountable to, like, if we're doing something that isn't in line with our values, like we say, it's not okay. And we work as a team to get better at it. So that's what's next, is continuing to get 1% better every day.
That's awesome. Well, I'll be tracking along, following along. Hopefully we can check in again at some point and
yes,
hear
I'd
how
love
that's
that.
going. So I'm sure there's a follow-up conversation to be had definitely in the future, what things are working and not working as you continue to work through that process. And I love all this. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you, Heather, for coming on.
You're welcome. If we're doing it well, we'll have things that we learned worked really well, and we'll have things that we figured out didn't, that we had to change and iterate on. If I come back and tell you it all worked perfectly, then we probably weren't stretching ourselves enough, because we didn't get to the edge of our comfort zone if we didn't learn some things that didn't work quite the way we thought they would.
Yep, that's how it works. That's how it goes.
Exactly.
Before we sign off, is there anything that you'd like people to know about coming up for you, event, program, or even are there open positions at BPM you're looking to fill? Anything like that you want to let everybody know about?
Yeah, we're always looking to hire sharp talent. So if you are looking to work at a firm where people do matter and we are working to help support your growth and development, I think one of the other things that's really unique about BPM is we not only want to help you be successful in your work and your role, but also in life. And so who you are outside of BPM, how you bring your whole self to work, the communities in which you serve, all of that is important to us, and you don't have to leave any of that at the door. We're really excited about things that are happening and in the direction we're headed.
That's awesome. Well, if people want to get in touch with you or connect with you, we'll make sure there's some links in the show notes for them.
Love to do that.
And for all of those listening in, this has been another episode of the Amplify podcast, the podcast for accounting firm growth, powered by the Association for Accounting Marketing. I want to thank you all for listening to another episode. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It would be super helpful for us on the show and just getting the word out. If you want to find out more about Amplify and all of our episodes, head over to accountingmarketing.org. You'll find our podcast under publications. If you'd like to find out more about me and my brand consultancy, Resound, head over to resoundcreative.com or email me at mike@resoundcreative.com. And until next time.